Good to have you with us tonight. I think we do pretty good at starting on time. I had to laugh on Sunday. Their Bible study was supposed to be at 9:30, and he said, yeah, we try to do Bible class between, 9:30 and 9:45. I was like, when does it start? Well, 9:30, but we try to make sure we're started by 9:45. I was like, I don't know how a teacher can do that, man. I got material to cover, but it was good. I had to laugh, but we're a couple minutes behind, but that's okay. Revelation chapter 20, we're going to finish this up. Now, I have another outline, but I didn't hand it out yet. We didn't post it. So tonight, we're going to hopefully finish up this outline, and then we'll do our next outline, and I think we'll be done by next Wednesday. I think we'll finish next Wednesday on this class, provided everything works out the way it will. So what we're going to do is next week, I've got a couple of goodies for you. I think they're good. I'm excited about them. So I've got our last lesson will be just basically why is premillennialism wrong? We're going to kind of recap. Not going to reteach the lessons again, but I'm going to kind of recap and give you kind of like bullet points to where you can kind of be okay. And then I'm not going to hand these out right now because I want to go over them in next week's lesson or this week's lesson, however, when we get to it. But I'm going to have these little cards for you. And what they are is it just deals with the end of time. And on the left-hand side, it says the Bible teaches. And there are, I think, 7 things that I've listed. And on the right-hand side, it says premillennialism teaches. And there's 7 things, and they correspond. So like the first one is the righteous and the wicked will be raised together. That's what the Bible teaches. There's the verses. And then premillennialism teaches there's 2 resurrections 1,000 years apart. So what these are is, these are really great, I think, for like, and it's up to you however you want to do them. Couple of different ways that I've seen people do these. I make these little cards for a lot of different things. I started doing it for kids. Don't be insulted by that, but I started doing like quick reference cards for kids when I started like doing what I called a Seeds of the Kingdom class, and parents were asking me, hey, can I get some of those? So I started doing them for the parents, and then the congregation wanted them, so I started doing them for the congregation. I've seen 2 different ways. I've seen people take the blank pages in their Bible and they'll glue them or tape them into the back of their Bible. So like if you're studying with somebody on premillennialism, you have kind of like a card that you could reference, make one on baptism, kind of the same thing. So kind of some of the more pertinent topics that you would be discussing with people. And I also seen a lady one time, and I thought this was really neat. She took like a notebook. She had like a notebook, and then she would glue them in that notebook, and that was her study notebook. But then like she'd carry that with her Bible, and then when she would go to family reunions and stuff, she'd have that in her Bible. So when people would ask her questions, she said, well, let's talk about that. She'd open her Bible, and then she'd open that notebook. Those are different ways to use those. They're just thoughts. You don't have to use them that way, but I really believe in 1 Peter 3:15, I really believe we need to be ready to give an answer. And if you're like most folks, and if you're like me, you just can't remember everything. You'll know, I know that passage is in there, but where's it at? So these cards are just helps to you. And don't feel bad about that. Listen, I've got notes all through my Bible. So, when I'm studying with people, I open up to a passage, and I'll open up a passage, and I have 5 or 6 notes beside that passage, and I can just lead them through, and then people, inevitably like, how can you remember all that stuff? I said, I can't. I have it written down. I just have methods that I can remember those things by, and that's how. If I can get the first one, I remember it, then I can go to the next one. So those are kind of helps, hopefully, that'll encourage you. We're going to get to that, though. I'll give you that at the end. All right. So let's begin with a word of prayer, and then we'll jump into our study, and I'll bring us up to where we are, and then we'll cruise right through. Father, thank you for your love and your mercy for this awesome day of sunshine and warmth. Thank you for the renewal of spring, all the beautiful wildflowers and the things that are blooming. Show your handiwork. Father, we see nature taking its normal course of action in life, and we just see renewal, and we see beautiful things that prove that you exist, Father. Your evidence is everywhere. Help us to look at it. Help us to stop. Help us to take time to enjoy it, not to be so busy in this life with things that'll run us ragged. Help us just to stop and enjoy every part of your creation. We love you. We thank you for our families. We thank you for the church family. Thank you for the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, our Savior. Help us to adore him and to worship him and to put him on the pedestal that he belongs and to keep him on that throne for life. Father, help us to love you more than anything. Bless our study tonight as we finish Revelation 20. May we rightly divide this truth. In Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, so Roman numeral number 1, this is where we've been. So you should have an outline, or hopefully you have an outline from last time, same outline. If you don't, there are some back there on the by the question box, so you can grab one of those. I'll give you the points kind of quickly again because some weren't here and some may have missed it. So number 1, the first point is restraint, and that's found in the first 3 verses of Revelation 20. Basically, we see this idea of, an angel having a chain. He binds Satan. Of course, we talked about it. He has the keys symbolic of authority. It's not literal. Just like the chain is symbolic of something that binds. It's not literal. Again, the 1,000 years is symbolic. It is of an indefinite amount of time or a complete amount of time. It's figurative. Again, that's very figurative language. We gave several verses to go with that to show that 1,000 years is often used, or 1,000 cows in some respects, are used to just talk about, boy, God owns them. And I think it was Mike gave the good illustration of I told you 1,000 times, very, very much like we do today. Okay, so we talked about the symbols under that idea of restraint, symbols. Then we had the serpent, no question who he is. He's the devil. I mean, God's very clear about who it is here. He is, and by the way, I read something the other day, and I just want to share this with you. It wasn't on Revelation 20 that I read, but the guy had written that he believes Satan is just an evil force. It's the opposite of good in our world. He's not really literal. It's not really literally Satan. I'll tell you what, you can't come away from a Bible study on Satan and not know that he's real. Okay? Revelation 20, it was the serpent, the devil, the deceiver, the liar from the beginning, John 8:44. So unfortunately, some people don't view him as real. He's real, okay? Very much so real. And he is not omniscient. He doesn't know everything. He's not omnipresent like God. He's not everywhere. But he has demons everywhere, and he has helpers everywhere. And so because of sin and because of Satan and all his messengers, there's sin everywhere. You won't get away from sin. So, sometimes we feel like if I could just get away from this world, I could get away from sin. So I'll move to Alaska where there's nobody. Guess what? If you're there, there's sin there. Okay? So we can't get away from sin. We can only attack it through Jesus Christ. That's the only way we can get really past it. Remember that. Don't forget that, okay? Because you struggle with sin. We all struggle with sin. You're not odd because you struggle with sin. You're faithful. That's why you struggle with sin. Patty.
I have an out there question.
Sure.
Do you believe that the demons are, visible to us?
No, although I've seen some children on my... No. That was joking. That was tongue-in-cheek, a little joke, make you laugh. No, I don't, Patty. I don't believe they're visible. We're talking about a realm beyond in the spirit world, just like angels. We're talking behind the scenes. No, I don't believe they possess people. I believe the Bible in Ephesians 4, he led captivity captive. He gave gifts to men. That idea seems to carry with it the idea of limiting Satan. And I believe when Jesus resurrected from the dead, scripturally, I believe he limited Satan to where he does no longer possess people. We can allow him to control us, but it is us giving him the reins, So, and that's not speaking of any mental health issues or anything like that. If a person's got a serious mental health issue, they may be almost out of their, out of a normal behavior, and it might seem like they're possessed by something, but they're not. That's a mental health issue, and there are lots of those in our world. We all have some mental health. I'm sure we all have some mental health. So that's a struggle some people have. But no, I don't believe he is visible or anything like that. But he's everywhere. He's everywhere. It's amazing to me how Satan pops. And I don't know how he works. I don't know all the ways he works. I know he has wiles. I know he has schemes. I know he's a tempter. I don't know how he works. Somebody said, I've referenced lots of times how I think Satan will put thoughts in your head. And somebody said, well, how does he do that? I don't know. And I can't really go to a passage and say, that's why I said methinks so. I don't want you to take this and run with it scripturally, but I'm telling you, there's really only two choices. It's either from God or from Satan. I mean, there's really not many other choices. And so when I allow and bad thoughts pop up where I'm not even thinking of them, like I said. So where does that come from? I don't know. So he said, well, Satan doesn't put that thought in your mind. Okay, well then who did? I didn't even know it was there. It came out from the psyche. He'll work on anything. And for some, he works through, and they've done studies with this. Some people are more prone to like alcohol addiction. Some people, I'm not saying they're born with it. I'm saying some people are more prone. Some babies are born if their mothers are addicted. They're addicted. But some people are more prone to bad thoughts. Some people are more prone to bitterness because of their backgrounds and that. So again, we give him the control though. We have to fight it. He doesn't have any more control than what we give him. And that's the part that frustrates me because I give him lots of control sometimes. Wish I didn't. But that's the fight. Restraint, symbols, serpent, summary. Okay, we gave the summary. Angels given power to limit Satan. And remember we used the illustration like a dog on a chain. Satan is limited, and I believe he's limited right now. He's limited. What limits him is ultimately the gospel of Christ, okay? And it was neat because when we were teaching this last week, I said to you, Satan's chains are being tightened down on him with one person, and that person was India. So we kind of knew what was going to happen afterwards because we've been studying with her. And, we limited Satan's power last Wednesday because the gospel penetrated her heart and she obeyed it. So that's how he's limited today. He's limited through the power of the sword of the Spirit. All right? So then we go secondly to reigning. All right? Reigning. And by reigning, I don't mean like rain droplets. I mean reigning. Like we see this idea of reigning in verses 4 through 6. Under that, we had souls. Verse 4, notice carefully they were souls, not bodies, like premillennialism teaches. Notice carefully it doesn't say they reigned on earth, or in Jerusalem. Okay, they weren't reigning in Jerusalem or on earth. And we made the point that where Christ is seen in the book of Revelation, he's seen in the throne room of heaven. He's not seen on earth. He's seen on the throne room of heaven. So where else would these people be reigning? They're reigning, he saw them like they were in heaven. And we made this whole point that they're the same souls that were asking how long in Revelation 6 and verse 9. They're under the altar asking how long, but when we come to Revelation 20, they're outside the altar and they're standing there victorious, okay? So they see that, hey, Satan's power is limited, it's only going to be for a little time, and we're victorious in the end. Seen souls. Secondly, we see sinners. Verse 5, and what I said by sinners was, here are these folks that were sinners and they obeyed the gospel. So technically, they're not sinners. They would be, they'd be saints. But these are the people that came through the waters of baptism, obeyed the gospel, and now they're faithful. Remember, in verse 5, there's no mention of the second coming, not whatsoever. There's no mention of a throne on earth. There's no mention of David's throne. There's no mention of Jerusalem or Palestine. Remember, premillennialism centers around all those things. There's no mention of it. And remember this, and these two words will be really important when it comes to Bible study. You either exegete or eisegete. Exegete literally means to draw out the meaning. So what God said, you're learning the meaning. Eisegete means you read into the meaning. You read into it. And so, you have to eisegete here in order to find Jerusalem and Palestine and a throne on earth. No mention of us reigning, but they reigned. Okay? Important. So that, again, just keep those thoughts in mind. And then lastly, we looked in verse 6, we looked at the saved. Blessed is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. First resurrection there, scripturally, just use the Bible as your commentary. What would we be talking about there? Baptism, coming up out of the waters of baptism. You say, well, how in the world do you ever get that? All I ever know about the first resurrection is what the Bible talks about. And that's the only other time really it's used is in that context of baptism, okay? And by the way, it makes perfect sense. It harmonizes here. If you look at it, it harmonizes well. So, okay, so number 3. Now we're on number 3. This is where we're going to start tonight. So we had restraint, we had reigning, now we have release. Verse 7 through 9. Revelation 20, 7 through 9. So we have release. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the 4 quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, and the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about in the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. Okay, so we're talking about this release now. He's been restrained, and now it looks like he's released. Well, what in the world is this talking about? Well, let's look at let's see here. Let's look at verse 7, and let's kind of have an explanation about what he's talking about. Satan's loosed out of his prison. So back up. Let's see what happens. The angel comes down. Again, this is a vision. This is symbolic. Angel comes down. He has the key to the bottomless pit. He has his chain. He binds Satan. And for 1,000 years, which not literal 1,000 years, this is just a period of time, a full, complete period of time. He comes down, he binds Satan. Satan's limited for a time period, okay? Then now, in these verses, we see he's been released. Now it seems like he's broken the chain, or the chain's been released from him, and now he's able to go about and do some things. He's almost like he's limitless. All right, let's talk about this for a minute. In the days of Noah, I want you to think about this biblically and just illustratively throughout the scripture. In the days of Noah, Noah prepared an ark according to the word of God. So God gave the instructions to Noah. When Noah was building the ark, what do we know? Sometimes by implication, and sometimes when we get to the New Testament. Okay? So we know it by implication. We also find it in the book of 2 Peter. Noah was doing something while he was building the ark. What was he doing? He was preaching. He was preaching. It was God's method for trying to save people. God was so disgusted. He was so frustrated. He said, I'm wiping everybody out. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And so God put this burden on Noah, and it would have had to have been a burden. I want you to build this boat, and I want you to save your family, and I want you to preach. I want you to preach. And we see that Noah's a preacher of righteousness. So he's preaching, and it gets to the point where how many people listened to the message? 0. Outside his family, no one listened to the message. So it got to the point where God said, all right, you're not going to listen to my man? You're not going to listen to what I had to say? Fine. I will destroy the earth. And God told Noah, get in the ark, shut the door, and the waters were released. Rain came down, the fountains of the deep opened, the world was flooded. Universal flood, immediately killing these people, all right? Well, some people look at God and they say, he's so mean and so vengeful. No, God's mercy and grace is seen for 120 years. And really prior to that too, But for 120 years while the ark was being prepared, God was preaching and he was pleading with people, and people got so sinful they wouldn't listen any longer. So let me tell you something. God warns you and you don't heed. Whose fault is it? Now, I've been on roads where there's been problems up ahead and it wasn't marked properly. And I came up on it quickly and barely got stopped. But I've also not been paying attention, and it's been marked very clearly. And I've gotten surprised when I get up there and the guy on the signs looking at me like, what kind of idiot are you? And I have to put down my window and said, a big one, I'm sorry. You had that plenty marked. I remember a case in West Virginia. I remember it's like it was yesterday. It was foggy, and I'm coming over the hill and over to construction. They had no signs up, none whatsoever. And it's literally a hill. And when I crested the hill, there was the construction right there. And there was not a sign, and it was foggy. I barely saw the guy, about hit him. And man, I come screeching halt. And of course, he's flipping, because he just about got hit with a truck. And I got out. I said, man, I'm sorry. I said, I'm so sorry. I never saw you. He said, I don't understand why. I said, hold on a minute, fella. There's no signs up here. He goes, didn't they put a sign up here? I said, I promise you, there's nothing from here all the way to Charleston. There's not a sign. I've just come 30 miles. I didn't see one sign, road work ahead. And man, he's like, I can't. He gets on the radio. Buddy, I tell you, when I came back, there were signs. All right? That wasn't very well marked. If I'd have hit that guy, I'd have felt terrible. It'd have ruined my life. But you know what? That wouldn't all been my fault. But if it's marked well and I don't read the signs, it's my fault. Okay? God put signs in the road, and he said, here's what I want you to do. And when people don't listen to those signs and they're destroyed, it's not God's fault. He's done everything he can to do. Secondly, I want you to think of another biblical example. In the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, It got to a point where sin was so rampant in those 5 cities of the plains. Sodom and Gomorrah are the 2 that we name often, but there were actually 5 cities in the plains there. There was so much sin in those places that God finally gave up. And do you remember Abraham? Remember he started out, he said, I'll tell you what, God, come on, you can't destroy this. You can't destroy these people. How about if I find 50 righteous souls? God said, okay, for 50 I'll do it. Abraham goes, comes back, he said, hold on a minute, God. And he gets down to 10. I think he gets down to 10. You check that. Check my reference on that. It'd be about Genesis 19. But he finally gets to the point where I think it was 10. If I can find 10 righteous souls, God said, yeah, it ain't going to happen, basically. And I'm paraphrasing. And what'd he do? Lot, you better get out. You better take your family and leave now because God's going to destroy this. And God did destroy it. And only Lot and his 2 daughters came out of that. You know, his son-in-laws, his wife, she left, but she didn't get very far because God put signs in the road. What I'm trying to say is at one point, God said, I had enough in the days of Noah, and I'm flooding the earth. In the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, he said, I've had enough. Sin is rampant, and I'm going to destroy it. And he did. All right. So let's look at a couple of passages that help harmonize Revelation 20. Let's look at Matthew chapter 24. And we'll go back to their sugar stick for a minute. Matthew chapter 24. And I want to look at verses 36 through 39. And what I just described to you, I just want you to see that it's just not a preacher story. But of that day, Jesus said, an hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. What day is that? That's the second coming. That's the last day. He says this in verse 37, but as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days of Noah, they were eating before the flood and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them away. So also shall they be the coming of the Son of Man. Jesus said, my second coming, things are going to be happening just like normal. There's not going to be any signs. So when I describe what I just described, one day God's going to be fed up and he's coming back. There's not going to be a sign. So what happens a lot of times when we get to that point, people say, and it's right. I'm not saying if you're thinking this that you're wrong, but people say, what do you think, Rodney? I mean, do you see all the things that are going on, or where do you think this could be it? I don't know, because there's no signs. I do know this, that it will be like that when it happens. It'll get to a point. So is Satan released? I don't think he is. Well, why do you say that? Well, because we just baptized a young lady last Wednesday night. So there's still some people that need the gospel, and there's still some people that are willing to obey the gospel. And I think there's a lot of people too. And by the way, it's not my job and your job to figure out when Satan's released. That's God's job, okay? So, and I'll explain that in a minute. Let's look at one more passage. Let's look at Luke 18. And there's a powerful statement here that sometimes we really don't, think about. So he says this in Luke 18 and verse 8, I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. He's actually talking about persecuted saints. He'll avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, will he find faith on the earth? And that's a question. That's a question. I believe it ties to Revelation 20. I believe what he's saying is here, the gospel's God's power. There will come a point, and I don't know when that point will come, and you don't either, and no evangelist does, no TV evangelist does. There won't be a sign, but it'll get to a point in God's mind, the infinite, all-wise, all-knowing mind of God that'll say, enough. Enough. Okay? What will that look like? That'll be in God's mind, no more souls would obey the gospel? Possibly. Could his long suffering run out? That could happen too, because it's happened before. In Noah's day, it got to a point where God knew only 8 people were going in that ark, and there was nobody else going to go in. And God said, it's time. Sodom and Gomorrah's day, same thing. He knew there were nobody else coming out of that city alive. It's time. I believe when the Son of Man comes, it'll be the same way. Satan is bound right now with the gospel. We bind him with the gospel. But one day, the gospel is still going to be powerful, but man will become so evil. And this is my, this is harmonizing the scripture. This is what I believe in Revelation 20. It'll get to the point where God will say enough's enough. And he will come back. And that second coming will be loud. Yeah, Mike.
I'm thinking about how blessed they were when Jesus walked the earth compared to everything
Yep.
It's everywhere.
It is.
You know,
It is.
you couldn't have a bigger message.
Right.
Except Jesus coming down, but when he does, we'll be ready.
Right. Exactly. And that's a great point. I actually dealt with this last night in a study with somebody. We were talking about, what about folks that are really good, well-meaning people that don't know the gospel? And I said, now that's why when I preach on false teachers, I cut them no slack. Some people even, not here, some people even have said to me, you're almost mean toward false teachers. No, I'm not almost mean. I'm absolutely 100% vehemently mean against false teachers because they lead people to a devil's hell. You get a platform to preach the gospel and you don't preach the whole gospel. You preach what people want to hear because you want to tickle their ears and because you want to stay at that place 40 years. Shame on you. Shame on you. You know what? No preacher likes to move. No preacher likes to be rejected. But I'm going to tell you what. I don't want to be rejected by God. I don't want to move from heaven. So I'm going to preach the counsel of God. That's what I'm going to preach. Why? Because that's what changes men's lives. That's what changed my life. It was the gospel. Does it hurt? Absolutely. The gospel crushes my toes sometimes. It's a great message that, do you obey? No, I'm not perfect at obeying it. It bothers me. I wish I was better. But that doesn't mean I want to not hear it. Because by hearing it, it helps me to grow in the areas I need to grow in. And there's lots of them. So my point is this. We need to preach the whole counsel of God. And false teachers that have a platform to preach and they don't preach the truth, that just aggravates me so badly. Because they have an opportunity. You look at some of these guys on TV, folks. Look at, hey, I'm not afraid to call these people out. I'm not. You look at Joel Osteen, whatever, however you pronounce his name. He's got, what kind of platform on Sunday mornings does that man have to preach? What kind of platform? I mean, that guy could go to a different country every week. He's got his own private jet, I'm sure. He's got money flowing. That's great. Use it for the glory of God. Preach the whole counsel of God. But you know what? What happens is if he would preach the whole counsel of God, that great big auditorium that is filled with people wouldn't be quite so full because there are people that don't want the truth. And so it's much easier. I know the temptation. I'm a people pleaser. I hate to have people mad at me. I hate it. There are times I grope and just drives me nuts dealing with certain subjects from the pulpit. I don't want to deal with them. I don't. I'm telling you that. I don't want to deal with that stuff because I would rather preach on the love of God and sing Kumbaya and go to lunch. That's what I would like to do. But not God's man. He can't. He's got to deal with the whole counsel of God. And I want you to know that's a burden on anybody that's faithful. It is. It's a burden. My point is this. It'll get to a point when people won't want to hear the gospel anymore. And I don't know when that'll happen. Does it look like we're heading that way? We've been that way for 150 years, I'm sure. I'm not that old, but I'm guessing it's been that. And people say, is it getting worse? I don't know. It's pretty bad in Noah's day. There were only 8 of them. I see more than 8 here tonight. The world was just about as full as it was now as it was then. So I don't know. Because you won't know either. We won't know. All right? At some point, this Satan is going to be released, it seems to me, from this passage. And there are other men that are greater than me that have a different take on that passage. But I believe with all my heart, that's what I believe it's teaching. Now look at verses 8 and 9. Back to Revelation 20. And look at verses 8 and 9. He goes on and talks about go out to deceive the nations. Now this is where people take this literal. This is where these literalists come back in. So Magog, what are these places? Magog was one of the sons of Japheth. Okay? Remember remember Ham, Shem, and Japheth? So one of the sons of Japheth. So this Magog would have been Noah's grandson. Genesis 10 and verse 12. Gog was one that Ezekiel uttered a prophecy against them. They were an enemy of Israel. There was a certain Gog, he said, came from the land of Magog and was the prince of Rosh. Ezekiel 38 and 39 talks about. Thus, there will be another enemy arise. It seems like he's referring to these people not literally, not like Gog and Magog, literal. He's using them like he's been using these illustrations. Like, the best one I can think of is Napoleon Bonaparte, his Waterloo. He's referring to that type of thing. You would say, he really met his Waterloo. Well, What's that mean? That means that was Napoleon's final defeat, and you know what? When you use the word Waterloo today, it means that's that person or that situation's final defeat, okay? Same thing here. Seems there'll be another enemy arise after the loosing of Satan, but they will be devoured by fire, the Bible teaches here. And so John says these are going to be as numerous as the sand of the sea, Revelation 20 and verse 8. And so let's kind of capsulate this. It seems like Satan's last-ditch effort to destroy the church will be, it will involve the majority of the world. Okay? To me, in Revelation 20, this is the last-ditch effort of Satan. Now, if you think about it, there are passages like 2 Timothy chapter 3, 13 through 17. Paul warned about a lot of this stuff, and it came in, some of it came in Paul's day. It was relevant in Paul's day. There was a man of sin that was going to be revealed. I don't know how you can read that and not see. You can't read the man of sin in Thessalonians and Timothy and come away saying, you think that might be somebody else other than the Catholic Church, the Pope? It's crystal clear. It's crystal clear there. Why? Because Paul knew it was happening. Paul knew it was coming. Acts 20, he said, of your own selves men will arise out of the eldership. That's exactly where Catholicism came from, okay? It came from a group of elders out of different congregations. And if you don't know this church history, this is phenomenal. This is an amazing fact, okay? And that's why when we preach the gospel, we got to be real clear about little details, because sometimes good intentions turn into liberalism and turn into anti-scripture. So what happened was there were problems in the church, and so there were these elderships that met from let's say Colossae. I'm just using these as examples. I don't know that they were from Colossae, but Colossae, Laodicea, Ephesus, these elderships got together and they said, how are we going to deal with these problems in the church? Kind of like, think of an elder conference, okay? And then they said, well, we really kind of need one spokesman, like to address the group. We need kind of like one guy. Now, how did they pick him? I don't know. They might have picked him because he had a big mouth. He might have had a louder voice than everybody else. That makes sense, doesn't it? I'll bet the intentions were great and dealing with the problems in the church. And finally, he said, well, wait a minute, hold on a minute. You over there at Laodicea, I'm from Colossae, but you over there at Laodicea can't do that. That's unscriptural. And he said, oh, okay, well then they can't do that in Ephesus. The next thing you know, you got one guy making decisions for everybody, all right? And then, now that was years later, and then it happened. They had one man to make decisions for the whole church. That man, years later, became known as the Pope. All right? And they structured Catholicism right after the Roman Empire. You had your Pope and your bishops and your cardinals and right down the line. Okay? Again, that happened probably with the best intentions. So maybe that's why you understand now, like, something may not seem that big a deal, but man, like, Rodney's kind of keeps bringing us back to the Scripture and he's adamant about it. The reason I'm adamant about it is because it's real easy to leave the Scripture when you start doing things man's way instead of God's way. Okay? We've got to be very careful of that. We got to be very careful. We do it God's way or else we cease to be faithful. And I know sometimes it's like, well, that's the best way we can do it at this point. I understand that. That might be the best way. Some congregations like ours don't have elders and deacons. Sometimes the preacher becomes the ruling agent. Let me tell you something. Your preacher's not going to become the ruling agent. I'm not going to be. I'm your evangelist. I'll preach to you. I will feed you. I will encourage you. But I will not make decisions for the church. I'll help. Sometimes I won't even vote because I don't even want put near that. Why? That's unscriptural. It's not scriptural for a preacher to have more authority than any man in the church. That's not, you don't hear a preacher say that very often, do you? It's truth, all right? It's truth. I am a servant just like you. It's kind of like, who's going to grab the basin first? Who's going to grab the towel? I'm racing you to it, okay? We're going to get the towel together. We're going to wash people's feet. That's all we're all doing, okay? So that means, Matt back there, he's got a real loud voice, and Matt's always talking, and we can't keep Matt quiet. But we're not going to give Matt more authority than Doug, because Doug's more quiet, okay? We're not going to do it. Why? Because that's what happened here, okay? So, long story short, the people, it came to the point where Satan was loosed, and it seems like he's going to be loosed one day, and this power is going to just be unbelievable. Here's a great quote from a man that's really scholarly. Here's what he said. With these things in mind, it becomes very likely that near the end of time, sin will rage throughout the world, and people will totally reject God. These verses seem to teach that the end of time will come when all people who will ever become obedient to God's law will have done so. So, but I want you to remember this because I don't want you to walk away on a Wednesday night discouraged. I don't believe we're there, okay? And Rodney, how are you going to know when we are there? One of two ways will happen, okay? Here's how I'm going to react. One of two ways, God willing. I will be dead, okay? And then that answers the rest of the question for me. Or Jesus will return. So what are you thinking? I'm thinking Philippians 1:21. For us to live is Christ, to die is gain. If Jesus returns, 2 thumbs up, maybe a toe up too, huh? Real excited. If he doesn't return, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to preach the gospel on Sunday. And as soon as Crystal gets healed up enough that we can have a study with her, we're going to study the gospel with her, and hopefully she'll respond. We'll baptize her too. And then who? I don't know. God's got a picture of somebody somewhere. I don't know. I just haven't seen it yet. He hasn't given me the picture. He just said, there's someone there that needs the gospel. Keep going. I don't know who the picture is. I don't know. You may know them. They may be in your life. You may work with them every day, like Sherry worked with India. I don't know. I don't know where they're going to come from because God drops them in our lap when we're doing his work. My point is this. We just keep going. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? He will here. He will in this little corner of the world, right? Amen. We're going to be faithful to death because we know we can't give Satan the power. He doesn't need any more power. He's got all he needs. Stand faithful. All right. Any questions on that? Hey, this is deep stuff. I'm telling you. They want to eisegete some things into it. They can eisegete it because it's easy to read into the text. Number 4, we have the ruling. I like this part. Revelation 20, 10 through 15. Here he goes. And the devil, this is my favorite part. So listen, if you've had like not a smile on your face up to this point tonight, you change it, okay? Turn it upside down. Whatever's going on in your life, turn it upside down just for a minute, okay? Here it comes. You ready? And the devil that deceived them, thank you, that's you, he deceives us, was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone where the beast and the false prophet are and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. Yay, right? Aren't you excited about that? I can't wait for that day. He is so agitating, isn't he? He gets us at our own game. God said, here's victory, folks. This is victory. Next verse 11. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. They couldn't get away from him. They couldn't get away from Christ. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. You ready? And the dead were judged out of those things that were written in the books, i.e. the Bible, 66 of them, and in particular 27 of them, although the 39 will apply, but we're under the New Testament. He said they were judged out of the books according to their works. And, well, wait a minute, what's that other book? What's the book of life? Where does that come into play? Joshua, where's the book of life come into play? You don't know? I think you do. I just caught you off guard. All right, I'm going to open the book of life, okay? I don't have access to it. But if I opened the book of life tonight, if I had access to it, I would open it up and I would read, whose name's in there? Mine. Yes, thank you, Sherry. Sherry Swineford. Oh, born... God might even have the date. I don't know. He might have the date. He might not. She was born. What are you saying, God? Well, she had part in the first resurrection, so the second death has no part on her. Oh, looky there. There's Sadie Dauberman. There's Mike and Donna Sullivan. Look at that. Born, I'll be. Look at Doug Birdsong. And hey, this is real, guys. Your name's in the book of life. Cherish that. God's going to open it. And I don't know how the judgment's going to be. I don't know if he's going to go down through every single faithful person's name. I probably wouldn't have enough patience if he did. I'd say, just take me up, God, if it's my name there. But when the roll's called up yonder, right? That's the roll we're talking about, folks. That's the roll call. And that's victory. He said the dead were judged out of those things that were written in the books according to their works. The sea, notice verse 13, the sea gave up the dead which were in it. Death and Hades delivered up the dead which were in them. And they were judged every man according to their works. Death and Hades were cast, thank you, into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. That last verse there, you need to remember this. Well, let's break this down and then we'll get to that last verse. All right, so ruling, under that we have torture, verse 10. Yeah, I like this part because you see who's going to be tortured? We got the devil. He's going to be tortured forever and ever. Listen, that whole concept that people have sometimes of Satan, I've seen cartoons and I've heard people say, well, he'll be like the chief shoveler down there, right? Shoveling coal into the fire. Sorry, no. No, you're not going to be working for Satan in hell. Okay? You're not going to hell. Hey, you're in the book of life. Stay there. Stay faithful. Satan is going to be tormented. In fact, the devil has a place prepared for him and his angels, and that's hell. God said, and here again, I'm sermonizing a little bit. God said, but those who follow him, I'm also going to put them there. But really, hell was not originally designed or being designed for the unfaithful, although that's where they'll end up. It was originally designed for Satan. This is a place just fit for you, Satan, and all your demons. Those who would not look at God, would not listen to God, you're going to follow them there too, all right? And so, there's going to be torture. It's not going to be soul sleeping. It's not going to be like, well, they're going to be like kind of just separated from light. It's not going to be that bad. No, it's tortured. It's day and night torturing. It's weeping, gnashing of teeth. It's where the worm never dies. It's where the fire never burns out. It's Gehenna hell. It's eternal, okay? Yeah, Mike.
There ain't no party.
There's no party. Not a bit. Not a bit. So, and I want you to think about this for a minute. We need encouragement. We need encouragement in our world. We need encouragement in the church. You think about this. Every time you've ever been maligned as a child of God, anytime your kids have been isolated because they've tried to live a faithful life at school, people made fun of them, people laughed at them, people going against us for standing for God's marriage plan and male and female, you feel like you're in the minority sometimes. I'm telling you, we're not. We're not. And I hate it. I hate saying it this way because it sounds so cruel. It's not so cruel. That's why we preach the gospel. These are God's stop signs. But hell is going to be filled with people that didn't obey the gospel. We have an opportunity now. Now, some people say, well, what about those in my life that haven't heard the gospel? Folks, that's why the church has plan A and one plan, and it's our major plan, okay? Listen, I love to get together and have fun and eat. You know that. That's great joy for me. But listen, that's not our mission. Does that mean we can't do it? No, we can encourage one another, and we can eat together, and we can fellowship, and we can have fun. We can go to hymn sings, and we can go to gospel meetings, and, we're allowed to smile as Christians. But that's not our mission. Our mission is the seeking and the saving of souls, because God's preparing this place for the devil and his angels, and everyone who doesn't obey the gospel will be there. So here's what we got to do. We got to get busy. We got to get busy sharing the message of Christ, okay? Be busy with that. All right, torture. Number next, the throne, verse 11. And I saw the great white throne, him that sat on it. Who's on the throne, by the way, in the judgment scene? Who is it? Jesus. Jesus. He is going to be the judge. The Father gave all judgment to Christ. He's got it, okay? This is the same throne of his glory. Matthew 25, verse 31. This is also a parallel passage to 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 10. So we see torture, we see the throne, we see tribute. I love the tribute. Of course, the book's there. John 12:48, Jesus said, he that rejecteth me and receiveth not my word hath one that judgeth me, the word that I've spoken, the same will judge him in the last day. So here's the standard. This is what's awesome. God has given us the manual, and he's even given us the test ahead of time. I had an instructor in school one time that he said, I don't really care if you guys, I don't really care what grade you get on the test. All I care is you learn the material. So a couple days before the test, he would say, I got the test laying up here. I don't know if you guys want to walk by and take a picture of it or something, you can. Well, you don't have to ask me twice, man, because I hate tests. I get test anxiety. So I'd look at those, I'd study those questions, I'd make sure I read that section, I'd read this and I'd read that. And you know what? Man, I could ace those tests. Why? Because I had to test ahead of time. I knew the answers. And you know what? He didn't want us to fail. He wanted us to know the material. That was the main thing. God gave us the manual. He gave us the test. He said, I want you to pass. I'm giving you every cheat sheet you got. Well, what cheat sheets? That'd be a good sermon. When I go away sometime in a gospel meeting or something, you guys preach that. What cheat sheets God gave you? What did he give you? He gave us the Bible in our own language. He gave us the World Wide Web. There's so much you can hear preaching all the time, good gospel preaching. He gave us good men, faithful men through the years. N.B. Hardman, all these good guys that preached the gospel and gave us their written works. Man, we're blessed. And then there's the book of life, Philippians 4:3, Revelation 3:5, Revelation 22:19. All passages refer to this. and here's the way I love to do it. It's like a muster roll. When they came up out of Egypt and they crossed the Red Sea, they came up out of there. It was like Moses was sitting up there and he was writing their name in the land of the living, okay? They marched for 40 years in the wilderness wandering. When they died, their names were crossed out of the book of life. You come up out of that watery grave of baptism, God writes your name in the book of life, and you keep walking and keep marching and keep being faithful, and your name will be there. God will open it, and you don't have to be worried about that. You don't have to be concerned about that. You be faithful to God. He'll make sure it's there. Lastly, the triumph. Look at verses 14 and 15. The death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. It's all over after this, folks. No more pain, no more suffering. Whosoever wasn't found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Now, earlier in the book of Revelation, death and Hades were seen riding on a pale horse of persecution. Revelation 6 and verse 8. Death has always been an obstacle for man. Hades has always been the realm of the dead, and you know, we've always been afraid of that. But when this happens on the last day, there'll be no more death. Remember 1 Corinthians 15? Parallel that passage here. The last enemy to be destroyed will be death. Notice this. Then will Jesus hand back the kingdom to the Father. That means he has the kingdom currently, okay? He's on his throne. Death has no more power over us. Let's conclude. The end is coming, but not as premillennialism teaches. We don't know. It'll be like a thief in the night. It'll be sudden. It'll be unexpected. Christ will not reign then because he's already reigning now. But on that day, he'll hand over that kingdom back to the Father, of which you and I are a part. Think about that. Our elder brother saying, presenting us to the Father. Won't that be a neat reunion? Here he is. Here they are. Who are they? Well, God will know. God will know. But who are? Oh, those are those folks at Susquehanna Valley. There they are. There they are. No kid. Well, you guys going through some tough times down there. Yeah, it was like there wasn't a lot of Christians in our area. We were in a mission field, and it was hard sometimes. And you know, I mean, man, there's problems in the church. There's problems in the world. We just kept trying to be faithful. You did it. You made it. Come on. Come here. Come up around the throne. Get up here. Show me, you know, and it'll be great. It'll be a great day. We've been faithful over a few things. He'll make us ruler over many. Let me tell you something, folks, and I stick with this premise. Premillennialism is false to the core. You can't study the Bible, love truth, and walk away and be a premillennialist. You can't do it. Now, you could be mistaught, and that's what we're pleading for people to do. We're pleading for people to look at the evidence, to talk about these things, to study these things, and come away with the knowledge of the truth. That's what changes people's mind. Premillennialism is false to the core. Next week, we're going to come back and we're going to conclude our premillennialism study. And we're going to talk about why it's wrong. There are going to be about 4 points, 4 major capsulated bullet points. Boom, 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 here they are. And I'm not going to have tons of explanation because I've already explained most of these. And then I'll give you the chart. We'll talk about that chart, kind of reference that chart, show you kind of how you can use that chart. And then premillennialism class for now, 2024 will be done. I'm sure I'll come back to it at some point in the ministry because we need to continue to teach these things. Are there any questions? Anybody have any questions or anything? And here's another thing too. If you've talked to somebody about, you know, and they've given you some things to think about regarding premillennialism, and maybe you say, you know, I just couldn't answer those questions. They're good at what they do. Okay, they're good at what they do. They'll because they believe it. I mean, they really do. Some of them really believe it, so they're going to try to twist you up. But it's false. Truth will always prevail. And so, you know, if you ever deal with anybody in this regard and you need some, I hate saying ammunition, you need some help, encouragement, whatever, feel free to ask. I don't have all the answers on it, but I do know this, God does. And if we search the scriptures, we'll find truth will prevail every time. Anything else? Larry? Nothing new. Does anybody know anything new about Ernie Ishman?
He had a bone marrow test today, but I didn't hear about the results.
Okay. So Sadie said he had a bone marrow test today, but no results yet. And that's so typical, isn't it? I hate to diss our medical system. We have the best we can have, but that's hard when you're waiting on results. And I know a lot of you have gone through that. I know right now some folks in our congregation are going through that, waiting on test results, and it's very anxious about those things. All right, yes?
Leah Fisher, her cancer is back.
It's back.
She had found a lump, even though she had both her breasts removed, she still found a lump. She had a biopsy 2 weeks ago, and she found out yesterday it's her cancer. She is scared. She's a scared little girl.
Yeah.
Breaks my heart.
Ours too, Sadie. That's got to be the worst some of you've dealt with.
I heard all those stories.